it is an incredibly rare opportunity. It is an unbelievably unique event where a Buddha is born into the world. If you want to think of it in terms of time, we have in Buddhism, we have Mahakalpas or Mahakappas, and think of it as multiplication of what we have as the Big Bang. In fact, the Big Bang, if you think of it as an event that took place about 13.7 billion years ago, it's still ongoing. We're still expanding. So when it reaches that point of, the farthest that it could go, let's say, and before the big crunch, as astrophysicists call it, takes place, that would complete one kalpa, that period of expansion. So it was over 4 Mahakappas, 4 times 4. We're talking about hundreds of billions of years where a Buddha appears. Now, when a Buddha appears, the reason for his appearance is to remove the darkness of ignorance. Now, if you think about us being human now and this period in a time where the Dhamma, which the last Buddha, Gautama Buddha, has taught, still being available, that would make it even more rare to be a human living now where the teachings of a Buddha are still available. Yet people don't have the urgency to really rise up to the occasion and make the most of their human birth. Human birth which will allow them to understand what the teachings are trying to say. We don't appreciate our birth as a human being because it gives us the perfect tools to understand and to evaluate between pleasure and pain, between sukha and dukkha, to pause and to consider, why am I here? Usually people have asked, who am I, why am I here, etc. But where did that lead them in the West? So this is a courageous path for those of us who are willing to go the distance. Otherwise, you're going to just pick and choose whatever you would like from it. And yes, in that sense, the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, can be helpful. But it will be a smear, a tiny little, a very, very, very faint layer of, superficial layer of this path. And in that sense, it won't be that much different from any other religious path out there, from any folklore, from any thing out there, because it would be so dumbed down. But that's not what the Dhamma is trying to do for us. Help us break through samsara, cycles, unending cycles of pain, unending cycles of rebirth, each of which is carrying with it limitless bundles of pain. We rarely consider how miraculous, unbelievably miraculous it is to be shown a way out of suffering. In the midst of the chaos that is a person's life, a human life. When you look at a human being who has been raised in this time period, not just now, but in ages ago, even thousands of years ago, the role that the upbringing that the human being as a child undergoes, the parents, the mishaps, the ways that it's so easy for the child to be scarred or stigmatized for this or that reason, and to somehow make it, to somehow come out and make something of one's life is quite wonderful. That shows something about the human spirit of resiliency. But when we talk about what the Dhamma is, the Buddha's teachings have been doing for the person to pull them out of suffering completely, fully getting them to liberate oneself, not just from one lifetime's stigma, or stigmas, plural, but from the things that the person has been dragging behind them, and all the underlying tendencies that they have been carrying with them for eons and eons and eons, to be able to cut oneself free from all those influences, to set oneself free, to attain freedom, to attain liberation, to attain Nibbana, to penetrate through all that I find to be truly miraculous. To have found a way, to have found a teaching, to have found and formulated the step-by-step guide whereby a human being could do this is something that we can never take for granted, something that we can just brush off and say, well, okay, that's nice, that's, I wonder how many of us would pause and consider the amazing nature of the Dhamma that Lord Buddha has taught. We think that a child, when they're born, if you let the child be, and that whole argument about nature versus nurture. So if you allow a child just to be in a nice environment, even in the most ideal set of circumstances, to surround the child with those, that they're going to turn out okay, better than okay. Almost gives you the impression that the child is a clean slate. There have been people who have even said that. A child, a newborn, is a clean slate. Well, when you look at this from the Buddhist perspective, nothing could be further from the truth, because the child shows up pretty screwed up, in the sense that there's so much that this being has brought with them in this body, with this brain. The mind has so many tendencies, unending series of habituations, things that they are accustomed to, thinking, processing, behaving, reacting, irrespective of what kind of upbringing this child is going to have now, post clean slate. People don't stop to consider this. But it is quite incredible. It's so amazing, it's so wonderful to be shown a path that allows a person, a human being, despite all those factors, if they follow a series of steps, to truly and fully cut themselves loose from the cycle of unending series of rebirths that bring with them tremendous sorrow, grief, pain, suffering, wailing, crying, weeping, beating your chest with agonizing pain every time you lose someone, something that you hold so dear, so meaningful, from the sphere of your experience of life. It's heart-wrenching. So if anything, just to cut yourself free from that repetition, that's already saying a lot as to what type of possibility is being presented through the introduction of the Dhamma, of the Buddhist teachings. So, in the worst of times, we need to stop and really, truly give appreciation for this amazing method that tells us, that shows us, that has proven itself to be able to pull you out of the gunk, of the mire, of the sludge, the ocean of sludge of old tendencies, of unwholesome behavior, of stubbornness, of arrogance, of conceit. Now, how do you do this? Lord Buddha has clearly demonstrated, explained again and again, that the very first step that allows you to bring this miracle about is through the building of virtue in your character. What he called sila. Ethical, moral living standards that you can instill upon your life. It doesn't come from an outside source, but it is something that happens, that you decide, of course, to uphold, to develop, to cultivate in you. This is the thing. There's nothing mysterious about the Dhamma. You are simply being shown the step-by-step process, but you have to, as they say, walk the path yourself. But how? What is the path? It starts with building for yourself a virtuous behavioral lifestyle. Your conduct has to reflect this. Every day, for yourself. And then you are actually building new habituation, new series of habits that clearly, like a laser beam, cuts through those old tendencies. No other method that I know of exists or has existed that allows a person to cut through. Because sila doesn't just stay sila. The code of discipline that one instills in one's character, of morality, of virtue, of higher virtue. But it starts from there, but it unfolds, it opens up to a level of stillness, calmness, within your heart, within your mind, that there's an expansion of consciousness. There's an expansion of awareness to unprecedented levels or depths. This cannot, does not, and it is impossible to be an outcome of any psychedelic drugs, any substances that one might take, any other trance-like practices that you see in other traditions. Be it through dancing, through chanting, through mantras, through this or that. It is a system that works and has worked since the day that Lord Buddha explained it. And the individuals who have attained by following these steps are innumerable, countless beings who have attained. So, I say this also because today you have a culture that is very pro taking of substances to experience what they call altered states of mind. You have religions that promote alcohol, wine, different types of plants, calling it, well, it's natural. Mushrooms, this, that. Or dancing, spinning until you get dissociated from reality. You go into a trance. Add to that certain types of sounds, drumming and songs and things. You go into an altered state of mind. That is not what we're talking about when we say the mind, the practice unfolds itself into deeper states of awareness and depth of understanding, which is the third stage. So there was sila. The second one that I was referring to is called samadhi. collected state of the heart, the mind, which opens up, unfolds into wisdom, discernment. And that discernment, you don't owe it to anyone. You don't owe it even to Lord Buddha. You owe it to the effort that you have been putting forth, your perseverance in following this step-by-step process. And then suddenly, from all of these phases of practice, there arises within you an insight, an understanding that keeps unfolding into more and more insights, where you no longer become, or you no longer stay rather, that bundle of negative habits. You no longer are susceptible to the old ways of doing things that have kept you going in circles, in samsara, in rebirths. All due to wisdom, your wisdom. Today's humanity is far immature to truly appreciate the beauty of the Dhamma. I say this after having lived on this planet for about over 50 years. And seeing how we have a propensity, a drive to look outside of ourselves. We look for religious practices or traditions or spiritual paths, if you will, that are outside of us, that teach us to go outside of ourselves for this state. There's no wisdom. And wisdom is a very personal affair. And it does not disappear. It is not temporary, like the impact of the drug, like the impact of that trance, like the impact of that emotionality, that high that you get when you keep jumping up and down and consider that as a religious practice. Or the sense of community that is around you. That is not what we're talking about. It's a very personal affair. So what we're talking about here is a religious path, the Dhamma, the Buddha's path, being so sophisticated that it requires, so advanced that it requires an advanced, a mature approach. That's why this path is not for everyone. This path is not for everyone. And that's why the Dhamma, Buddhism, in its span of life, basically over 2,600 years almost, it has gone through many countries and cultures, and it dominated different areas of Asia. And then what happened? It disappeared. And it is disappearing again. In those places where it has been strong for centuries or millennia, it's disappearing, not because of it kind of running out of steam, but no. It's disappearing because human beings today have lost a true appreciation of it, a consideration of it, an understanding of its value, and what it takes to truly live a happy life. So you need a type of a person, a caliber of character, a person's approach that is mature. And we don't have that, as we used to. there isn't that sense of urgency. There is urgency for other things, of course, but for setting yourself free, for that purpose, there is hardly any urgency. That's why the Dhamma, as it is often being taught in desanas, in Dhamma discourses around the world today, unfortunately, is so tamed, quote unquote, is so watered down to fit the cultural palates of today's world. Not to offend people, not to make people feel uneasy. Above all, not to have the supporters lose interest. So there's other bells and whistles added over the centuries that have nothing to do with the teachings. So today's Dhamma is the way it is practiced in the world, the way it is being taught, is a figment, is a tiny little faint, has a faint resemblance to what Lord Buddha taught, because it's missing that key ingredient, which is samvega, the urgency factor within the person. And that has to come from the teachers to promulgate, to teach that. So this Dhamma is for those who are seriously interested in cutting themselves loose from their old tendencies. Not to cover anything up, not to embellish some identity or to add new identities to themselves, but to truly experience happiness, lasting happiness, life-transforming happiness, where you truly become a clean slate. That's what an arahant is, an awakened being, an enlightened being. He or she is a clean slate. Despite what has happened, Dhamma is the only thing, the only teaching out there that has and does give us that. And Lord Buddha, all he did was provide us with a map, a treasure map. But you can keep a treasure map under your pillow, you can put it in a Swiss bank account, a safe in the Swiss mountains somewhere, hide it, bury it, write legends about it, stories about it, but never actually get outside your door and walk towards that X marks the spot portion of your treasure map. You will never know. So this path Lord Buddha gave us, provided for us, is for those of us who are willing to go the distance. For us. After all, when a person attains Nibbana, it is not someone else's liberation we're talking about. It is that person who has liberated oneself, and no one can liberate anyone else. No one. So it's a joke when people say, I will postpone my liberation to help other people become liberated. What a farce. What a joke. What stupidity. What an insult to the teachings of Lord Buddha. But you have now a big portion of Buddhists for centuries believing in that nonsense. We have to liberate ourselves. As I've said this many, many times in previous talks, Even when you get on a plane, when the flight attendants are going through the drill of showing you what to do in case of an emergency, when it gets time for them to show you how to use an oxygen mask in case of an emergency, and they also will tell you that if you're flying with a youngster, a baby, someone that is under your care, that need your attention, that you do not take the time and put on the oxygen mask on them first. No, 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 no. They advise you to put on the oxygen mask on yourself first, then tend to other people's needs and safety. We agree to that. We see the logic and reason in all that, but somehow we've convinced ourselves that postponing my own awakening for the awakening of all beings, look how far distant into the future I pushed my own freedom from suffering. Look how stupid it is. Look how lazy it's teaching the person to become. What a shame. So this is a path for wise ones. This is a path for responsible ones among us, who are true, who are honest with themselves, and no longer are interested in telling lies to themselves. And all of it comes through the generosity, the immeasurable compassion, kindness of that one being whom we call Gautama, the Buddha. And we are exceedingly, incredibly fortunate to be living, born and living at a time period where it still is available. That miraculous path is available. And what are we doing about that? If your hair is on fire, you don't postpone anything. You run into the nearest body of water. Anything, a bottle of water, something. You do something to extinguish it. But here we have an entire lives, entire cultures, entire world that's on fire with greed, with lust, with anger and hatred and delusion. And we're looking the other way. So each of us are responsible for ourselves first. So that's all. That's all.